Chauncey Billups might really be the most underrated player in the history of the NBA. It truly is amazing how a player can accomplish what he accomplished in his career, coming where he came from, the route that he had to take. But yet, he is never brought up in discussions that I think, at a bare minimum, he deserves consideration for. And in today's video, I'm going to break down the career of Chauncey Billups and why I believe he is so underrated, not only in the basketball world, but in the sports world in general. But before we get started, if you are not subscribed, make sure you join the family and hit that sub button and bell for post notifications. If you enjoy these career deep dives, let me know by commenting below in the comment section. It really helps me a lot. But without further ado, let's return to the start of Chauncey Billups' career. Coming out of Colorado and being the third overall selection in the NBA draft in 1997, Chauncey was seen as one of the best players in the draft class. The class included Mark Jackson, Steven Jackson, Tracy McGrady, and even Tim Duncan with the first overall pick. Chauncey was seen as a very good defender, a capable three-point shooter, and a capable playmaker, averaging 19 points per game and shooting over 40% from three. What was there not to like about him coming into the league? It was obvious why he was drafted third overall, but unfortunately, even though the Celtics sucked, him and the coach Rick Pitino, who was also the executive at the time, he and Chauncey didn't mesh very well due to reasons unknown. You would think if you take a guy with the third overall pick at a position your team is pretty much lacking at the time, and your team is pretty trash, this would provide him the opportunity to shine. And hell, whenever he played, he showed up and showed out, and even on most occasions exceeded expectations. Hell, in the month of December of his rookie year, the man shot 49% from three. The Celtics truly did not know what to do with him, to the point that they didn't know if he was a point guard or a shooting guard. I mean, think about it. Even though the man is 6'3", let's try him out at the two guard to see if that works out for him. Even though we drafted him as a point guard, the situation got so bad that after 51 games of his rookie year, he was traded to Toronto Raptors at the trade deadline. Years down the line, he was asked about his time in Boston and said, and I quote, "That didn't help. They didn't give me the chance to really slow down and listen to myself, listen to the game, what's going on. I never really had a chance. It was a recipe for disaster." And he's right, because the fact that they didn't even give him a full season as a starter is insane to me. But then you move on to his time in Toronto, and it truly doesn't get any better, if I'm quite honest, because though he didn't play that well, shooting below 35 from the field and 32 from three, only after playing 29 games at the end of his rookie year with the Toronto Raptors, he was then traded again to another team, being the Denver Nuggets, and a three-way deal involved the Minnesota Timberwolves. This now marks him being on three different teams in the span of 2 seasons. It is some D-Lo-esque shit right here. And I wish I could say things got better for him, but unfortunately, it still goes downhill from here. As in his first year with the Nuggets, he only played 45 games due to being traded later on in the season. But in his second year with the Nuggets, he suffered a shoulder injury that kept him out for the remainder of the season. And unfortunately, this is the NBA, it's a business. The Nuggets traded him again. He was moved to the Orlando Magic, ironically didn't play a single game despite being in the team's season photo. Around the NBA world, people at the time viewed Chauncey Billups as a bust. Let's not forget, he was the third overall pick. It got to the point that the Magic didn't even bother to bring him back after his rookie contract expired. He would then sign with the Minnesota Timberwolves alongside Kevin Garnett, and then point guard Terrell Brandon. Originally, the plan was for him to be the backup point guard, and that's what he did. A great shooter and defender that could relieve Terrell Brandon whenever he went to the bench. And do a pretty good job while doing so. But at the end of the season of 2002, Terrell Brandon, T-Rail My nigga T-Rail actually suffered a major knee injury, and Chauncey Billups stepped in as the starter to close out the year. In the last 34 games, Chauncey exceeded a lot of people's expectations, averaging nearly 15 points a game and 7 assists, 3 rebounds, and a steal, shooting 41 from the field, 39% from 3 on 4 attempts, and 89% at the free throw line. The Timberwolves would finish the season with a winning 50 games, finishing top 5 in offensive rating and points per game. And though they did get swept in the first round against the Dallas Mavericks that year, Chauncey was excluded from all the blame in that series, as he more than exceeded expectations, averaging 20 points per game, 6 assists, 5 rebounds, 1 steal, shooting 45 from the field, and 70% from the free throw line. Chauncey was so excellent in the stretch after Terrell Brandon got injured in the 2002 season and in the playoffs against the Mavericks, to the point that many people considered it a breakout season. And though he made it known to the Timberwolves that he wanted to return, and to the media, the Timberwolves decided to stick it out with Terrell Brandon as their starting point guard, despite his injuries. Now, obviously, despite KG winning an MVP in 2004 and then making the Western Conference Finals that season, we all know how that story ended. And I do truly believe Chauncey staying in Minnesota is one of the more underrated what-ifs in NBA history. But after the Timberwolves made it clear that they were not going to bring him back, he would sign a 5-year, $35 million deal with the Detroit Pistons that offseason. And immediately, once he touched down in Detroit, he was hailed as a fan favorite in that city, as the Pistons were consistently contenders in the Eastern Conference, making conference finals appearances essentially every single year, as Chauncey was a consistent 16 to 18 point per game scorer and a great playmaker, an amazing shooter, especially for his time, shooting over 40% in multiple years with the Pistons, a great playmaker and decision maker. And as a defender, these were the years that he peaked on that side of the ball, even making multiple defensive teams in the process. Throughout his time in Detroit, he would make the All-Star team 5 times. He made 3 All-NBA teams, includes a second team selection and 2 third team selections, and he would make back-to-back second team All-Defense in 2005 and 2006. And what's so amazing about his time in Detroit is that the Pistons were not held for their offensive power in the 2000s. It was actually quite the opposite. It was their defensive firepower, as contributions from not only Chauncey Billups, but Ben Wallace, Rasheed Wallace, Tyshawn Prince, and Rip Hamilton, and many other guys that made this team arguably the greatest defensive unit of all time. I mean, if you play 2K with them, most of them niggas cannot shoot for shit. That is why they are bottom tier. But I still fuck with them niggas. This was not some random Eastern Conference team that was the second round out. While he was there, it was quite the opposite. This team made multiple conference finals in a row, 6 to be exact, and hasn't gone back there since. But the cherry on top of his career in Detroit, we all know, is in 2004, the NBA Finals, as the Pistons headed into that series against Shaq and Kobe's Lakers that had Gary Payton and Karl Malone, the alleged super team of the season, were heavy underdogs and pulled off a 5-game gentleman's sweep against the Lakers, as many people regard that 2004 Finals as the biggest upset in NBA history. And Chauncey Billups was easily the best player on the court in that series, as he not only contributed to the defense that forced Kobe Bryant to shoot 38 from the field and 17 from 3, but alongside his defense, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Alongside his defense, he averaged 21 points, 5 assists, a steal and a half, 3 rebounds, shooting 51% from the field and 47% from 3. 93% at the free throw line, which accumulates to a true shooting percentage of just short of 70%. It is truly one of the most underrated finals performances of all time, because this team was not some flashy offensive juggernaut that were quite the opposite. They were defensively sound as a unit, and that was able to cause problems for even the most generational, talented offensive players. And for his effort against the Lakers in 2004, he was awarded with the Finals MVP, along with his one and only championship. But it doesn't just stop there, as the Pistons, even though they didn't win another title throughout the remainder of their tenure with Chauncey, Ben Wallace, Rip Hamilton as the trio, they were still able to make it back to the NBA Finals the next year against the San Antonio Spurs. And had it not been for the heroics of Robert Horry in Game 7, who is probably the GOAT, by the way, because he does have 7 rings. If we count rings, Robert Horry is that guy. And if he has fucking 7, I say he better than Jordan, he better than LeBron. But that's an argument for another day. Due to the heroics of Robert Horry in Game 7, there's a good chance the Pistons win back-to-back. I wish I could say this story ends with Chauncey retiring Detroit, but unfortunately I can't say that, as unfortunately due to Ben Wallace leaving them, the Pistons truly were never the same, as they never made it back to the NBA Finals. They were still a powerhouse in the Eastern Conference, but with players like Dwayne Wade, LeBron James, and the conference getting a lot tougher than it was in the earlier 2000s, the Pistons decided to move on from Chauncey Billups as they traded him back to Denver in exchange for Allen Iverson. And after a pretty underrated year in Denver that you could argue is the best regular season of his career, averaging 20.6 assists on 42, 39, and 91 shooting splits, which led to them making their only Western Conference Finals appearance in the Carmelo Anthony era, which, by the way, Chauncey Billups was their best player that year, not Carmelo Anthony. He then got traded to the Knicks at the deadline of 2011 with Carmelo Anthony, then later went to the Clippers when Chris Paul went there because he wanted to be on a contending team, then went back to Detroit at the end of his career to wrap things up. So as you can see, Chauncey's career, despite being filled with twists and turns to start things off, quickly became one of the best success stories in NBA history. In my personal opinion, the man was tossed around like a motherfucking whore to every team until they learned to stop being trash and somebody let that man cook and do his job. Extremely underrated, probably should be in the NBA top 75, along with Klay Thompson. One of them really old niggas that didn't score that many points, they could have kicked him down. Or like they should make a list where you have some special mentions like the past guys, and when we do the whole ceremony thing, they still get the love shown to them. We can't really forget about the old niggas. The point is, like, subscribe, show a brother some love.